General secretly followed his soldier after work. What he saw left him in tears. The morning had been brutal. The sun bore down on the parade ground, and the air was thick with dust and sweat. Soldiers shouted cadence, boots striking the asphalt in perfect rhythm, except for one. Private Davis's footwork slipped. Her mind had wandered again. She clenched her jaw, trying to snap herself back into focus, but the weight pressing on her chest wouldn't leave. Private Davis. The voice thundered across the field, cutting through the rhythm of marching boots. General Aucoinor, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed in his pressed uniform, stalked forward. His stare was cold steel, his words slicing. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? This isn't a playground. You're a soldier. Act like one." Davis stiffened, her throat tightening. "Yes, sir," she barked, forcing her voice steady, though her hands trembled against her rifle. "Focus, or I'll have you run laps until your legs give out," he snapped before turning his attention back to the formation. The unit pressed on. Davis pushed her tears inward, burying them under discipline, but they burned hot behind her eyes. When training ended hours later, Aucoinor dismissed the group, his scowl still etched deep. Davis moved quickly, hoping to disappear before anyone noticed the sheen in her eyes. She grabbed her bag and left the base with hurried steps, clutching a plain white paper sack from the mess hall like it was the only thing tethering her to the ground. General Aucoinor followed his own routine. Paperwork, final orders, and then the long walk to the parking lot. The day was almost over, but as he rounded the corner near the stone wall that lined the walkway, he froze. The sound hit him first. A broken sob carried on the wind. He turned his head and saw her. Private Davis, still in uniform, walking ahead of him down the sidewalk outside the base. Her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking. In one hand, she clutched the food bag. The other swiped quickly at her face, as though trying to erase the tears before anyone could see. For reasons he couldn't explain, he slowed his steps. Something in that cry tore at him, something that made him feel suddenly ashamed of the sharpness in his voice earlier. She hadn't noticed him. Her world was folded inward, consumed by grief. She walked quickly, almost as if trying to outrun her own sorrow. Aucoinor should have turned back, let her have privacy. Generals didn't follow privates home, but his boots moved on their own, carrying him down the path behind her. Careful to stay far enough back, he told himself it was concerned that it was his duty to know if one of his soldiers was breaking. But in truth, it was more than duty. It was human ache, the kind that couldn't be left behind. At the gate, the sun dipped lower, painting the trees in a melancholy glow as Davis turned off the main road. Her shoulders hunched tighter, the weight of her backpack and her hidden pain dragging her down. Every few steps her hand rose to her face again, wiping furiously only for the tears to return. Aucoinor clenched his jaw. He had scolded hundreds of soldiers in his career, broken them down to rebuild them stronger. But something about Davis had struck him differently today. The emptiness in her eyes, the way she flinched when his voice rose. It wasn't defiance he had seen. It was distraction, desperation. She didn't notice him at all. Not when she crossed the street. Not when she adjusted the strap on her shoulder. Not even when her sobs grew harsher, and she stopped under a tree, clutching the food bag against her chest like it might hold her together. Aucoinor slowed, his chest heavy. His instincts told him to turn back, that he had no right to follow her further. But his heart wouldn't listen. He saw not just a soldier under his command, but a young woman barely holding herself up against a storm no one else could see. The walk stretched on past quiet houses down a narrower road toward a modest apartment complex, where the paint was peeling and the grass grew wild. Davis unlocked the door with trembling hands, glanced once over her shoulder, and disappeared inside. Aucoinor lingered at the corner hidden by the hedge. He could still hear her muffled sobs through the thin walls as she stepped inside. For the first time in years, the decorated general felt utterly powerless. His world was medals and discipline, orders and obedience. But none of that had prepared him for the sound of one young soldier crying alone with no one to hear but him. General Aucoinor stood at the edge of the apartment block, his hand still pressed to the hedge, as though it were holding him up. He could hear muffled sounds through the thin walls, a voice cracking, a sob torn from a throat too raw to keep quiet anymore. He hadn't meant to follow this far, but something inside him refused to turn back. He'd seen soldiers stumble, seen them break on the field. But this was different. This wasn't about training. This was about life. Through a gap in the curtains, faint light spilled out. He saw Davis set the white takeout bag down on a chipped table and drop heavily into a chair. Her hand shook as she pulled out a carton, but she didn't eat. She just stared at it, tears dripping silently into the food. Then a voice called faintly from another room, fragile, weak. "Amir, is that you?" Davis wiped her face with her sleeve and stood quickly. "Yes, Mama, it's me." Her mother's voice trembled. "Did you bring dinner?" "Yes," Davis said, forcing strength into her tone. "Don't worry." She carried the food into a dim bedroom. O'Connor shifted his stance, guilt and sorrow tugging at him as he realized her mother was bedridden. He saw the shape of a frail woman propped against pillows, for tubes dangling from a cheap stand, her cheeks sunken with illness. Davis knelt at her side, spooning small bites gently into her mother's mouth, her own tears running unchecked. "I'm sorry it's late," she whispered. "I had training. I'll make it up to you tomorrow." Her mother touched her hand weakly. "You're doing so much already. You shouldn't have to." "Don't," Davis interrupted, choking back a sob. "Please don't say that." She fed her mother slowly, her own stomach audibly growling, though she never took a bite. Achenorb Unk's chest tightened as he watched from the shadows. The tough, stoic soldier he had scolded that morning was just a daughter, young, exhausted, stretched thin between service to her country and service to the woman who had raised her. When the meal was done, Davis sat on the floor beside the bed, her forehead resting against her mother's blanket. "I can't do this much longer," she whispered, voice breaking. "I try to focus, but my head is always here. I messed up again today. The general yelled at me, and I deserved it. I don't know how to be in two places at once. I don't want to fail them. I don't want to fail you." Her mother's frail hand stroked her braids gently. "You're not failing anyone, baby. You're the strongest person I know." But Davis shook her head violently, her sobs spilling out louder now. "No, I'm not strong. I'm tired. I'm so tired, Mama. I don't sleep. I don't eat. I'm terrified every morning they'll find out and send me home in disgrace. And then we'll have nothing. You'll have nothing." The words shattered something inside O'Connor. His throat thickened, his hands trembling against his sides. He had thought her distraction during training was laziness or indifference. He had barked at her in front of the others, convinced he was teaching discipline. Now he saw the truth. She was carrying a weight heavier than any rucksack the army could strap to her shoulders. Inside, Davis cried into the blanket, repeating over and over, "I can't lose you. I can't lose you. You're all I have left." Her mother pulled her close with what little strength she had. "And you're all I have," she whispered back. O'Connor Unk's vision blurred. He had commanded men in combat, watched them bleed, watched them die, but nothing pierced him like this. The quiet suffering of a soldier who wore the uniform with pride while hiding a personal war no one else bothered to see. For a long while he couldn't move. He stood rooted to the sidewalk, the cool night air cutting into his skin while inside the small apartment. Grief and love tangled together in whispers. Finally, when Davis helped her mother settle back into sleep, she sat again on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, face buried in her arms, her body shook with silent sobs, until exhaustion claimed her. The general turned away then, his fists clenched, his jaw locked. Tears slid down his face in silence. He hadn't cried in decades, but now he couldn't stop. Not because of weakness, but because he finally understood. The next morning, when Davis lined up for roll call, she braced herself for more scolding. Her eyes were swollen, her uniform still damp from the night's tears. But instead of barking at her, Achenorb only looked at her differently. His eyes softened, carrying the weight of what he had seen. She didn't know he had followed her. She didn't know he had stood outside her apartment, hearing her cries, seeing the battle she fought alone every night. She only knew that for the first time her general looked at her not just as a soldier, but as a human being. And though she would never forget the shame of crying in the street, O'Connor would never forget the sound of it. The cry that had unmade him, the cry that had taught him that sometimes the bravest soldiers weren't the ones who charged into battle. They were the ones who held their families together in the shadows while the rest of the world looked away. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales. And let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love hearing from all of you. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching.